And beyond in a couple minutes. Jonathan?
Thanks, Ryan. A transgendered man in St. John says MCP should pay for some of his procedures, but right now, Christopher Higdon has to go away for the surgery he needs. Here and Now's Chrissy Holmes is covering the story. Chrissy's joining us now live to tell us more about it. Well, Chrissy, what can you tell us about Christopher Higdon?
Well, Jonathan, Chris is a 29-year-old originally from the New Harbour area who calls himself a family man. He has a job in a call center, a female life partner, and a stepdaughter. He considers himself a straight male. The only problem is he was born a female, and that's something that he says has caused him a lot of discomfort and fear while living as a man. Christopher Higdon says he knows that gender dysphoria is something that most people find difficult to understand.
It's an extreme hatred of one's body. I'm a man living in a woman's body. I had a whole family.
Higdon says he's lived with this feeling all his life. As a 6-year-old girl, he told his family that he was a boy. 6 years ago, doctors here diagnosed him with gender dysphoria. 1 year later, he got a prescription for testosterone and began injecting it bi-weekly, all part of making the transition from female to male.
You will eventually have your Adam's apple. Mine is very small right now, but it will get there.
And for the first time in his life, Higdon says he's happy.
Because I was finally going to be myself.
Higdon lives as a man, right down to using the male washroom. But until he gets top surgery or breast removal, Higdon says he also lives in pain. Because right now he's using special binding garments to hide his large chest, making it difficult to breathe.
It's caused trouble with breast lumps.
Higdon says he does it because he's even more afraid of being outed.
We worry about being assaulted in a washroom or being assaulted in public for being transgendered. That's really important that we have our surgeries.
To live comfortably as a man, he wants to have his breasts removed. Doctors here say they're capable of performing the procedure, but MCP won't fund it unless he gets another diagnosis from a special clinic in Toronto. A diagnosis that also takes up to 2 years, because he has to go through the same process he's already gone through all over again. A process Higdon says he can't afford on his own. Chris says he can't uproot his family and move to Toronto for a process that could take up to 2 years, so he's decided to take matters into his own hands. Chris's doctors are petitioning MCP, asking why their diagnosis and recommendation for top surgery isn't enough, and he's also started a fundraising campaign to help pay for the surgery. Chris says he's not doing this only for himself. He says there are many other people in urban and rural parts of the province who live with this condition in silence. And now he's fighting on their behalf too. Live for Here and Now, I'm Chrissy Holmes.
You're looking at a live show.
Higdon describes his struggle with his gender identity.
Typhoon Haiyan slams the Philippines with 300-kilometer-an-hour winds.
Keep watching, folks. There's a second story on this issue coming right up.
I'm just a normal person, and the fact that so many people believed in me is so heartwarming. A Clarenville teacher is in the healthcare system to pay for a surgery he says he's eligible to have. The problem is MCP won't cover certain procedures unless they are diagnosed at a special clinic in Toronto, even though he's been diagnosed by doctors here. Tonight, Christopher Higdon says their medical opinion shouldn't be enough. Well, Here and Now's Chrissy Holmes is covering the story. She joins us once again with the details. So what can you tell us about Christopher Higdon's situation? Well, Debbie, it's a complicated one, and not necessarily for the reasons you might first think. Chris says that he's certain he's a man. He lives as a straight man. He has a female partner and a stepdaughter. But he was born a large-breasted woman and is hiding his chest under special binding garments in order to appear more like a male. Now he wants to have surgery to remove his breasts because he feels that having them actually puts himself and his family in danger. Christopher Higdon says it's hard for him to look back at pictures of himself as a little girl, because he says growing up is hard when you feel like a stranger in your own body.
As early as 6 is a memory that I have of announcing that I was a boy. The more you hit puberty, the more unhappy I became, and just became a shell of myself.
Like most little boys, Higdon says he preferred tools to dolls. He says he just wanted to be one of the boys.
What little boy group wanted to carry around a little girl who was developing breasts to go fishing with them?
Growing up in rural Newfoundland, Higdon says he tried to hide who he was to fit in.
Well, I felt like I was crazy. I went to a doctor who basically told me as such. But I knew that it was that time that I needed to change it. It was either that or I had to take my own life.
Higdon says he was saved when a doctor in St. John's told him that his feelings were legitimate. And after a long process, he was diagnosed with gender dysphoria. The diagnosis was the first crucial step toward correcting what Higdon called a disfigurement.
Well, I'm disfigured by the fact that I have a female body. I'm a man living in a woman's body.
1 year later, Higdon was prescribed testosterone. Shooting it was the first step toward making the transition from female to male. Within months, Higdon began to grow facial hair. Then, his jaw started to widen.
There is sweat changes, there's changes in your urination patterns, and there's changes to your female genitalia that make it more masculine.
But Higdon says the testosterone didn't get rid of his large breasts. In order to look like a man, he flattens them with special binding garments. A painful process that he says is necessary in order to do things most men feel safe doing, like using public washrooms.
But physically, you've got so many stories of trans people being physically assaulted, being sexually assaulted, and being murdered. And this happens daily.
Higdon says it's for his safety and the safety of his family that he wants his breasts removed. MCP does cover the surgery for patients with gender dysphoria, but to qualify, the diagnosis has to come from Toronto.
All my doctors have petitioned MCP on my behalf, and they get the same response.
MCP won't fund it unless he goes through the same 2-year diagnosis process again at a special clinic in Toronto. Now Higdon says he's taking the matter into his own hands. Higdon says he can't afford to pay for the surgery or the back and forth to Toronto on his own, so he started a fundraising campaign to pay for it. And he's also asking people to sign the petition to help send a message to government that a diagnosis from doctors here should be enough, because he argues, why go through the same 2-year diagnosis process twice? He says he's not just fighting for himself, he says he's also fighting for all the others out there that are going through the same struggle. Chris says his 5-year-old stepdaughter has been very accepting, and it's through her love that he's actually learned how to accept himself. Jonathan?
Thanks very much, Chrissy. That's Here and Now's Chrissy Holmes reporting tonight live. Meanwhile...